What if the most dangerous thing in a war zone isn't the enemy you expect, but something you can't even name? Imagine being sent deep into a place where every rule you know suddenly stops making sense, where silence is louder than gunfire, and the only thing more unsettling than what you see is what you can't explain. That's exactly what happened to one Marine squad in the spring of 2008, when they were ordered into the Kunar Valley, a place already infamous for its brutal terrain and hidden dangers. But what they found there wasn't just another firefighter ambush. It was something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The story you're about to hear isn't the kind that makes it into official reports or history books. It's the kind whispered about in barracks late at night, when the lights are low and nobody wants to admit they're scared. It's a story about a mission that started with simple orders: secure a few villages, keep the supply lines open, and push deeper into the mountains. On paper, it sounded routine, but the reality was anything but. From the moment the squad set foot in the valley, something felt wrong. Not just the usual tension of entering hostile territory, but a deeper, colder kind of dread. The kind that settles in your bones and makes you question every step. The air itself seemed to press in, heavy and expectant, as if the land was holding its breath. There were no welcoming faces, no curious children peeking from doorways, not even the distant echo of gunfire. Just a silence so complete it felt unnatural, as if the valley itself was waiting for something to happen. Rumors have always swirled around places like Kunar, stories of entire villages vanishing overnight, of strange lights flickering on the ridges, of patrols that never returned. Some say it's just the fog of war, the kind of thing that happens when fear and exhaustion start to play tricks on your mind. But others insist there's more to it. Whispers of old Soviet experiments, of tunnels carved deep into the mountains, of machines left running long after their creators disappeared. Most of these stories are dismissed as superstition, the kind of tales soldiers tell to pass the time. But every now and then, something happens that makes even the skeptics pause. For this squad, the first sign that something was off wasn't an ambush or a firefight. It was the way the villages looked when they arrived. Doors left swinging on, meals half-eaten on tables, blankets still warm from bodies that had vanished without a trace. No signs of struggle, no hurried escape, just a sense that life had been interrupted in the middle of an ordinary day. It was as if the people had simply stepped out for a moment, expecting to return, but never did. The squad's orders were clear: sweep the area, report anything unusual, and keep moving. But as they pushed deeper into the valley, the sense of unease only grew. What they didn't know was that they were walking into a story much older and much darker than any war they'd ever fought. A story written in symbols carved into stone, in whispers carried on the wind, and in the silence that seemed to follow them at every turn. And as the days passed, it became clear that the real threat wasn't the enemy they'd been trained to fight, but something hidden beneath the surface, something that had been waiting for them all along. So what really happened in the Kunar Valley? Why did entire villages vanish without warning? And what did the squad find buried deep in the mountains that was never meant to be uncovered? This is the story of a mission that was never supposed to be completed, of secrets buried beneath decades of war, and of the silence that still echoes long after the last shot was fired. Stay with me, because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about war, loyalty, and the price of knowing too much. Orders and arrival orders in a war zone rarely come with explanations. For the squad sent into Kunar Valley, the instructions were as bare as the landscape itself: move deep into the mountains, secure a handful of villages, and keep the supply routes open. No one asked why. In that part of Afghanistan, you learned quickly that questions only led to more questions, and answers were a luxury nobody could afford. The squad packed up, checked their gear, and loaded into the battered vehicles that would carry them as far as the roads would allow. Beyond that, it would be boots on the ground, every step a gamble. The approach to the valley was a journey in itself. The roads twisted through narrow passes, cliffs looming on either side, the kind of terrain that made every driver's knuckles turn white. Dust hung in the air, coating everything in a fine layer that seemed to seep into your skin. The further they drove, the more the world behind them faded away. No more radio chatter, no more distant sounds of helicopters or convoys. Just the steady grind of tires on gravel and the low murmur of men trying to keep their nerves in check. Even the jokes, usually a constant in any squad, grew thin and forced. When the vehicles finally stopped, it was at the edge of a landscape that looked almost untouched by time. Jagged mountains rose on all sides, their peaks lost in clouds. The valley below was a patchwork of stone and scrub, with narrow trails winding between clusters of mud brick houses. The squad dismounted, weapons at the ready, eyes scanning every shadow. There was no welcoming committee, no sign of life at all. Just the wind, sharp and cold, carrying the faint scent of earth and something else, something metallic, almost electric, that no one could quite place. The silence was the first thing everyone noticed. In a place like that, you expect noise, distant gunfire, the bark of dogs, the everyday sounds of people going about their lives. But here, there was nothing. Not even the echo of their own footsteps seemed to carry. It was as if the valley itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the stillness. The men exchanged uneasy glances, each one feeling the same chill settle in their bones. Even the most seasoned among them, men who'd survived firefights and ambushes, felt the weight of that silence pressing down. Corporal Hines, always quick with a comment, muttered that it felt like walking into a photograph, frozen, unreal, as if time had stopped. Nobody laughed. The squad moved forward, boots crunching on gravel, every sense straining for the smallest sign of danger. The first village on their map was less than a mile ahead, but the walk felt endless. Every ridge, every cluster of rocks seemed to hide 1,000 eyes. The squad's formation tightened, weapons sweeping across the landscape, nerves stretched thin. When they reached the village, it was clear something was wrong. The place looked abandoned, but not in the way you'd expect after a firefight or a hasty retreat. There were no bullet holes, no burned-out buildings, no signs of violence at all. Doors hung open, swinging gently in the wind. Pots of water still sat on stoves, meals half-eaten on tables, blankets rumpled as if someone had just gotten up. It was as if the entire population had simply vanished in the middle of their daily routines. The squad fanned out, moving from house to house, calling out in case anyone was hiding. But there was no answer, just the echo of their own voices bouncing off empty walls. Inside one house, a child's shoe lay in the doorway, its laces still tied. In another, a teacup sat on a windowsill, the tea inside gone cold. These small details gnawed at the men, each one a reminder that whatever had happened here, it hadn't been planned. If the villagers had been warned, they would have taken what they could. But everything was left behind, as if they'd expected to return at any moment. The squad regrouped outside, shaken in ways they couldn't quite explain. Some tried to brush it off, suggesting the villagers had gone to visit relatives or moved downriver. But nobody really believed it. Lieutenant Farrow, the squad leader, ordered a sweep of the area, but there was nothing to find. No tracks, no signs of a struggle, not even footprints in the dust. The only thing left was the silence, thicker now, almost suffocating. The men checked their radios, hoping for some word from command, but the airwaves were dead. No updates, no new orders, just static. It was as if the squad had slipped off the map, left to navigate a place that didn't want them there. As the sun began to set, the shadows grew longer, stretching across the valley like fingers. The squad set up a temporary perimeter near a stone bridge, rifles across their knees, eyes scanning the darkness. The mountains pressed in on all sides, the sky turning from blue to black in a matter of minutes. The cold settled in, biting through uniforms and making every breath visible. The men huddled together, sharing what little warmth they could, each one lost in his own thoughts. That night, as the squad tried to rest, the silence was broken only by the wind and the occasional creak of old wood. But beneath it all was a sense of waiting, a feeling that the valley was watching, listening, and deciding what to do with its new visitors. The squad didn't know it yet, but their mission had already changed. They weren't just there to secure villages or keep supply lines open. They were about to become part of a story that had started long before they arrived and would continue long after they were gone. And as the darkness deepened, one thing became clear. In Kunar Valley, Nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. The real danger was just beginning to reveal itself, and the squad was already in too deep to turn back. The vanished villages. The first village was only the beginning. As the squad moved deeper into the Kunar Valley, the pattern repeated itself with a precision that felt almost deliberate. Each village marked on their maps appeared exactly where it should, but everyone was a ghost town. The men swept through narrow alleys and mud brick homes, boots echoing on hard-packed earth, but there was never a soul to be found. No children's laughter, no elders sitting in the shade, not even the distant sound of livestock. It was as if the entire valley had been scrubbed clean of life. What made it worse was the way everything had been left behind. In one house, a radio still played static, its batteries long since drained. In another, a loaf of bread sat half-sliced on a wooden table, the knife beside it. The squad found beds still made, clothes folded neatly on shelves, and family photos pinned to the walls. There were no signs of panic, no evidence of a hurried escape. It was as if the villagers had simply stepped outside for a moment, expecting to return before the tea cooled. But they never did. The men tried to make sense of it, tossing theories back and forth as they moved from house to house. Maybe the villagers had been warned of an impending attack and left in an orderly fashion. Maybe they'd been relocated by local authorities, or fled to avoid getting caught in the crossfire between rival factions. But none of those explanations fit what they were seeing. If people had left under threat, they would have taken their valuables, their food, their children's toys. Instead, everything was left behind, untouched and waiting. Corporal Hines, usually the first to crack a joke, grew quiet as he picked up a child's drawing from the floor, a stick-figure family, smiling under a bright sun. He tucked it into his vest without a word. Brenner, the squad's most experienced sergeant, ran his fingers along a row of prayer beads left hanging on a nail. "This isn't right," he muttered, voice low. "People don't just vanish like this." The others nodded, each one feeling the same chill settle in their bones. As the squad pressed on, the villages grew even stranger. In one, they found a goat still tied to a post, bleeding weakly, its water bowl empty. In another, a pot of stew had boiled dry on the stove, the smell of burnt food lingering in the air. The men moved with increasing caution, weapons always at the ready, but there was never any sign of a fight. No bullet holes, no blood, no shell casings. Just the eerie sense that they were walking through a stage set after the actors had left. The silence became oppressive, pressing in on the squad from all sides. Every sound they made seemed to echo too loudly, as if the valley itself was amplifying their presence. At night, the men huddled close, sharing whispered fears and uneasy glances. The usual banter faded, replaced by a heavy quiet that none of them could shake. Even the lieutenant, who prided himself on keeping the squad focused, seemed rattled. He double-checked the maps, radioed in their position, and waited for orders that never came. The squad's radios, usually a lifeline to the outside world, offered nothing but static. Attempts to reach command were met with silence, as if their voices were being swallowed by the mountains. The men began to wonder if anyone even knew where they were anymore. The sense of isolation grew with every passing hour, every empty house, every unanswered call. As the days wore on, the squad started to notice other things, details that didn't fit any logical explanation. Strange marks carved into door frames, symbols scratched into stone, patterns that none of them recognized. Brenner took photos and sent them up the chain, but there was never any response. The marks looked old, but the cuts were fresh, as if someone had been there just before the squad arrived. The men argued over their meaning, warnings, directions, or something else entirely. But no one had any real answers. The deeper they moved into the valley, the more the landscape itself seemed to change. The air grew colder, the shadows longer, and the sense of being watched became impossible to ignore. At night, some of the men swore they heard footsteps just beyond the perimeter, soft, deliberate, never close enough to see but always there. Others dismissed it as nerves, the mind playing tricks after too many sleepless nights. But the feeling persisted, gnawing at the edges of their sanity. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, the squad gathered around a small fire, the flames barely enough to keep the darkness at bay. Hines broke the silence. voice barely above a whisper. "What if we're not alone out here?" he asked. The question hung in the air, unanswered. No one wanted to admit it, but everyone felt the same thing. The valley wasn't empty, it was waiting. The next morning, the squad found a trail of footprints leading away from one of the villages. Bare feet, small and light, disappearing into the rocks. They followed the tracks for a while, but they ended abruptly at a patch of disturbed earth. Brenner knelt down, brushing away the dust, but found nothing beneath. Just more questions, more uncertainty. By now, the squad was running on nerves and adrenaline. The routine of clearing houses and checking perimeters became mechanical, a way to keep their minds occupied. But the sense of dread never left. Every empty room, every untouched meal, every silent radio call was a reminder that something was deeply wrong in the Kunar Valley. As the squad prepared to move further north, Lieutenant Farrow gathered the men and tried to rally their spirits. "We stick to the mission," he said, voice steady but eyes betraying his own doubts. "We keep moving, we keep our heads, and we get out of this valley." The men nodded, but the words felt hollow. The mission had already changed, and deep down, they all knew it. The vanished villages were more than just a mystery, they were a warning. And as the squad pushed deeper into the mountains, they couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had emptied those homes was still out there, watching, waiting for them to take the next step. Song and symbols. As the squad pressed further into the valley, the landscape itself seemed to shift, growing more hostile and unfamiliar with every step. The mountains closed in tighter, the air thinning until every breath felt like a struggle. The silence that had haunted the first villages now seemed to follow them, a constant companion that pressed against their eardrums and made even the smallest sound feel like a violation. But it wasn't just the emptiness that gnawed at the men, it was the sense that something was being left behind for them to find. It started with a single mark carved into the face of a boulder that jutted out over the trail. At first, it looked like nothing more than a scratch, the kind of thing you'd expect from years of wind and rain. But Brenner, always the first to notice what others missed, stopped in his tracks and knelt down for a closer look. The lines were too sharp, too deliberate. They cut across each other in a pattern that didn't match any language the squad recognized. Not Arabic, not Pashto, not even the crude graffiti sometimes left by passing fighters. It was something else. Older maybe, or just different. The men gathered around, each offering their own theory. Hines joked that it looked like runes from some fantasy novel, but nobody laughed. The mark felt out of place, like a message written for someone who wasn't supposed to understand it. Brenner snapped a photo and sent it up the chain, but as usual, there was no response. The silence from command was starting to feel less like an oversight and more like a warning. As they moved on, the marks began to appear more frequently. Some were carved into the trunks of ancient trees, others scratched into the mud brick walls of abandoned homes. Each one was different, but they all shared the same jagged, intersecting lines. Sometimes they were accompanied by other symbols, circles, arrows, even what looked like crude maps. The squad started to keep a running tally, marking each new discovery on their own maps. But the pattern made no sense. The symbols seemed to lead nowhere, pointing in every direction and none at all. The deeper they went, the more the marks began to feel like a trail of breadcrumbs, left by someone or something that wanted to be found. Or maybe it was a warning, a way of telling outsiders to turn back before it was too late. The men argued about it around the fire at night, voices low and tense. Some insisted it was just the work of bored villagers, a kind of local superstition meant to keep strangers away. Others weren't so sure. The marks were too fresh, the cuts too clean. Someone had been here recently, and they'd gone to great lengths to make sure their message was seen. One evening, as the squad set up camp beneath a jagged overhang, Hines broke the uneasy silence. "You ever get the feeling we're not the ones doing the hunting out here?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Like we're being led somewhere?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. Nobody wanted to admit it, but the feeling was impossible to shake. Every new symbol, every fresh mark felt like another step deeper into a trap. The squad's nerves began to fray. Even the smallest sound, a rock tumbling down a slope, the wind rattling through dry branches, set everyone on edge. The men started sleeping in shifts, rifles always within arm's reach. The usual banter was gone, replaced by a grim determination to keep moving, to find some explanation for what they were seeing. But the valley offered no answers, only more questions. One night, as the men huddled around a flickering lantern, Brenner pulled out a notebook and began sketching the symbols they'd found. He compared them to the few scraps of information they'd managed to gather. Old Soviet maps, fragments of local folklore, even the faded graffiti left behind by previous patrols. Nothing matched. The symbols were unique, a language without a key. "Maybe it's not meant to be understood," Pharaoh said quietly, watching the shadows dance on the cave walls. "Maybe it's just meant to keep us guessing." The next day, the squad stumbled upon something that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. In the center of a clearing, surrounded by a ring of stones, was a wooden post. Nailed to it was a piece of cloth, stained and weathered, with one of the same jagged symbols painted in what looked like dried blood. The message was clear, even if the meaning wasn't. Someone had been here, and they wanted the squad to know it. The men exchanged uneasy glances, each one feeling the weight of unseen eyes watching from the shadows. As they pressed on, the marks grew bolder, more frequent. Some were carved high up on cliff faces, others etched into the very ground beneath their feet. It was as if the valley itself was trying to communicate, using a language that defied translation. The men began to feel less like soldiers on a mission and more like intruders in a place that didn't want them. The sense of being watched grew stronger, the silence heavier. Even the air felt different, charged, electric, as if a storm was about to break. The squad's radios continued to offer nothing but static. Every attempt to reach command was met with the same dead air, the same sense of isolation. It was as if the valley had swallowed their voices, cutting them off from the rest of the world. The men started to wonder if anyone even knew they were still alive. The only thing that kept them moving was the hope that somewhere ahead there would be answers. But the valley had other plans. The marks and symbols were only the beginning, a prelude to something much darker. Until the squad moved deeper into the mountains, the sense of unease grew into something closer to fear. The men began to realize that they weren't just following a trail, they were being drawn into a story that had started long before they arrived and would continue long after they were gone. And as the sun dipped below the jagged peaks, casting the valley into shadow, the squad understood one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever was waiting for them in the darkness, it wasn't finished yet. Night terrors and unseen watchers. Night in the Kunar Valley was a different kind of darkness. It wasn't just the absence of light, but the presence of something else, something that seemed to press in from all sides, thick and suffocating. As the sun slipped behind the mountains and the last traces of daylight faded, the squad's world shrank to the small circle of their camp, the flicker of a lantern, and the cold steel of their rifles. Every shadow seemed to move, every gust of wind carried secrets, and every man felt the weight of unseen eyes. The first night, the squad tried to keep things normal. They set up a tight perimeter, checked their gear, and took turns on watch. But the silence was relentless, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig or the distant howl of wind through the rocks. The men spoke in whispers, as if afraid to disturb whatever was listening just beyond the firelight. Even the most seasoned among them, men who'd faced down ambushes and survived the worst the war could throw at them, found themselves glancing over their shoulders, nerves stretched thin. It didn't take long for the unease to turn into something closer to fear. Around 2 in the morning, the squad was jolted awake by the sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, moving just beyond the edge of their camp. At first, they thought it was one of their own, maybe someone getting up to take a leak. But a quick head count proved otherwise. Every man was accounted for, wide-eyed and clutching his weapon. The footsteps continued, circling the camp, never coming close enough to see, but always there. Hines whispered into the darkness, demanding to know who was out there. But the only answer was silence. The men strained their eyes, searching the tree line for any sign of movement. The darkness seemed to swallow their flashlight beams, turning every branch and boulder into a potential threat. The footsteps stopped as suddenly as they had started, leaving behind a silence that felt even heavier than before. No one slept after that. The squad sat in a tight circle, backs to each other, rifles across their knees, waiting for something, anything, to break the tension. By morning, the men were exhausted, nerves frayed and tempers short. No one wanted to talk about what had happened, but the fear lingered, unspoken but ever present. The next night, it happened again. This time, it wasn't just footsteps. There was the sound of something being dragged across gravel, a low, scraping noise that set everyone's teeth on edge. The squad froze, listening as the sound moved around the camp, always just out of sight. Brenner signaled out for everyone to stay low, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of an enemy. But there was nothing, no shapes, no shadows, just the sense that they were being watched by something that didn't want to be seen. The psychological toll was immediate. The men grew jumpy, flinching at every sound, snapping at each other over the smallest things. The usual camaraderie was gone, replaced by a grim determination to make it through the night. Even the lieutenant, who prided himself on keeping the squad together, seemed shaken. He double-checked the perimeter, radioed in their position, and waited for orders that never came. The silence from command was starting to feel like a message in itself: you're on your own. As the days passed, the squeeze world shrank even further. The daylight hours were spent moving from one empty village to the next, searching for any sign of life, any clue that might explain what was happening. But the nights were the worst. The men took turns on watch, but no one really slept. Every time someone closed their eyes, they were haunted by dreams of empty houses, abandoned meals, and the ever-present sense of being watched. Some of the men started to see things, shapes moving in the darkness, flickers of light on distant ridges, shadows that seemed to shift when no one was looking. Hines was the first to admit it out loud. One night, as the squad sat in silence, he whispered, "We're not alone out here. I can feel it." The others nodded, each one feeling the same thing. It wasn't just paranoia. There was something in the valley with them, something that moved in the shadows, watched from the ridges, and made its presence known only when the sun went down. The squad tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was local fighters testing their nerves before an attack. Maybe it was villagers hiding in the mountains and waiting for the Americans to leave. But the patterns didn't fit. The footsteps were too deliberate, the sounds too calculated. Whoever or whatever was out there, it wasn't interested in a fight. It was watching, waiting, learning. One night, Carter, the youngest in the squad, cracked under the pressure. He stood up suddenly, shouting into the darkness, demanding that whoever was out there show themselves. The squad grabbed him, pulling him back down, hissing at him to keep quiet. But it was too late. His voice echoed across the valley, carried on the cold night air. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from the ridge above, came a whistle, a long, high-pitched note that cut through the darkness like a knife. Another whistle answered from the slope below, then a third from behind the squad. The men spun in every direction, rifles raised, hearts pounding. But there was nothing to see, only the sound of the whistles moving around them, circling, closing in. The whistles faded as quickly as they had come, leaving the squad shaken and silent. No one slept that night. By dawn, the men were hollow-eyed, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. The sense of being watched was now a certainty, an unspoken truth that none of them could deny. The valley wasn't just empty, it was alive, and it was paying attention. As the squad packed up and prepared to move out, the lieutenant tried to rally the men. "We stick to the mission," he said, voice tight. "We keep moving, we keep our heads, and we get out of this valley." But the words rang hollow. The mission had already changed, and everyone knew it. The real enemy wasn't something they could fight with bullets or grenades. It was the silence, the darkness, and the unseen watchers who moved just beyond the edge of the light. The nights in Kunar Valley had become a test of endurance, a battle not just for survival, but for sanity. And as the squad moved deeper into the mountains, they couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was watching them was only getting closer. Cold War relics and buried secrets. By the third day, the squad's nerves were frayed, and the sense of being watched had become a constant ache. The valley's silence was no longer just unsettling. It was oppressive, a weight that pressed down on every conversation, every step. The men moved with a kind of mechanical caution, eyes scanning the ridgelines, fingers never far from their triggers. But it wasn't the threat of an ambush that haunted them now. It was the growing certainty that they were walking through the aftermath of something much bigger, something that had left its mark on the land long before they arrived. The first real clue came in the form of a discovery that none of them could explain. In the third abandoned village, tucked away behind a crumbling wall, they found a stack of wooden crates. The boxes were heavy, sealed tight, and marked only with faded stencils. No language, no unit insignia, nothing to indicate who had left them or why. Brenner and Hines pried one open, expecting to find farming tools or maybe supplies left behind by fleeing villagers. Instead, they found metal canisters, each one stamped with a string of Cyrillic letters and a date, 1986. The squad fell silent, exchanging uneasy glances. Everyone knew what that meant. The Soviets had been gone from Afghanistan for decades, but their shadows still lingered in places like this. Old landmines, rusted vehicles, the occasional bunker hidden in the hills. These were the usual relics of a war that had never really ended. But this was different. The canisters were in perfect condition, the seals unbroken, as if someone had been maintaining them all these years. Brenner snapped photos, sent them up the chain, and waited for a response. As usual, there was nothing but static. Inside another crate, they found stacks of documents, some burned, others only half destroyed. The papers were Bristol, edges charred, but a few pages were still legible. The writing was a mix of Russian and something else, a language none of the men recognized. One page bore a stamp with the year 1986 and a symbol that looked like a double-headed eagle. Another was covered in diagrams, maps of the valley, sketches of tunnels, and what looked like blueprints for machines the squad had never seen before. In the corner of one page, a single word stood out, written in English: classified. The men gathered around trying to piece together what they were seeing. Brenner, who'd spent time with intelligence units, recognized some of the terminology, references to containment, relocation, and testing suspended by directive. The implications were chilling. Whatever the Soviets had been doing in this valley, it hadn't been abandoned. It had been sealed, hidden away, and left to rot in the mountains. And now, by some twist of fate or design, the squad had stumbled right into the heart of it. The discovery changed everything. The squad's mission, already shrouded in secrecy, now felt like a setup. The silence from command was no longer just frustrating. It was suspicious. Farrow, the lieutenant, tried to keep the men focused, but even he couldn't hide his unease. "We're not here for supply routes," Brenner muttered one night, voice low. "We're here to find something, or to make sure it stays buried." The others nodded, each one feeling the same dread settle in their gut. As they moved deeper into the valley, the signs of Soviet presence grew more obvious. They found rusted barrels half buried in the dirt, lengths of cable snaking out from beneath rocks, and the remains of old radio equipment scattered among the ruins. In one cave, they discovered a rotted wooden chair and a series of papers nailed directly into the stone. Hand-drawn maps, notes in Russian, and symbols that matched the ones they'd seen carved into the rocks outside. The air inside the cave was thick with dust and the faint metallic tang of old machinery. But it was the machines themselves that truly unsettled the squad. In a hidden chamber, deep beneath a collapsed tunnel, they found a row of consoles covered in dust, their dials and switches labeled in Cyrillic. Wires snaked across the floor, some cut, others still humming with a faint, inexplicable energy. In the center of the room stood a massive cylindrical object, cables running from its base deep into the rock. The machine gave off a low, steady hum, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the men's bones, setting their teeth on edge. Brenner leaned in, reading the faded warning painted above the machine in red. He recognized only one word: danger. The squad didn't linger. They took photos, sent them up the chain, and waited for orders that never came. The silence from command was now deafening, a clear sign that whatever they had found was not meant to be reported. The men argued about what to do next. Some wanted to destroy the machines to make sure no one could ever use them again. Others insisted they needed to keep moving, to get out of the valley before it was too late. The psychological toll was immediate. The men grew paranoid, snapping at each other over the smallest things. The usual routines, setting up camp, checking gear, keeping watch, became rituals of survival, ways to keep the fear at bay. But the sense of being watched never left. Every night, the footsteps returned, circling the camp, always just out of sight. The whistles echoed from the ridges, a reminder that the valley was not as empty as it seemed. The squad's world had shrunk to a handful of men, a few battered radios, and the secrets buried beneath the mountains. The discovery of the Soviet relics had changed the mission forever. They were no longer just soldiers on patrol. They were witnesses to a story that had been hidden for decades. A story that someone, somewhere was still trying to keep secret. And as the squad prepared to move deeper into the valley, one thing was clear: whatever the Soviets had left behind, it was never meant to be found. The machines, the documents, the symbols, they were all pieces of a puzzle that no one wanted solved. The men pressed on, driven by orders they no longer trusted, into a darkness that felt older and more dangerous than any enemy they had ever faced. The machine in the mountain. The further the squad pushed into the valley, the more the landscape seemed to close in around them. The mountains pressed tighter, the air grew thinner, and the silence became a living thing, an invisible force that seemed to follow their every move. The men had stopped talking about the mission. They no longer speculated about the vanished villagers or the strange symbols carved into stone. All their energy was focused on survival, on putting one foot in front of the other, and on ignoring the growing sense that they were being herded towards something they were never meant to see. It was on the 5th day that they found the entrance. The trail had narrowed to a thin ledge, barely wide enough for 2 men to walk side by side. Below, the river was just a glimmer, far out of reach. Above, the cliffs loomed, jagged and unforgiving. The squad moved in silence, every sense straining for the slightest sign of danger. That's when Brenner spotted it, a seam in the rock, straight and vertical, almost invisible beneath a layer of dust and moss. He brushed it clean with his glove, revealing cold metal beneath. The squad gathered around, hearts pounding. The seam was too perfect, too precise to be natural. It was a door, taller than any of them, set flush into the mountain. There were no markings, no handles, no visible way to open it, just a flat slab of steel, streaked with rust but otherwise untouched by time. Carter, the youngest, stared at it in disbelief. "What the hell is this doing here?" he whispered, voice barely audible. Farrow, the lieutenant, stepped forward and pressed his palm against the metal. It was cold, almost painfully so, and it seemed to vibrate with a faint, rhythmic pulse. The hum they'd been hearing for days was stronger here, resonating through the soles of their boots and settling deep in their chests. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a presence, a warning, a heartbeat that belonged to the mountain itself. The squad took photos, sent them up the chain, and waited for a response. As always, there was nothing but silence. The men argued about what to do next. Some wanted to move on, to leave the door behind and pretend they'd never seen it. Others, like Brenner, insisted they'd come too far to turn back. "This is why we're here," he said, voice tight. "This is what command wanted us to find." Hines shook his head, eyes wide with fear. "Or maybe it's what they wanted us to never come back from." As they debated, movement caught their attention on the ridge above. Shadows flickered between the rocks, figures just out of sight, watching but not approaching. The squad froze, rifles trained on the high ground, but the watchers made no move to attack. They simply stood there, silent and unmoving, as if guarding the door. Hines muttered, "They're not trying to keep us out. They're making sure we don't go in." Farrow tried the radio again, voice tight with frustration. "Overlord, this is Hunter 1. We found a structure, requesting immediate instructions. Do you copy?" Static. He tried again, but the only answer was the relentless hum, now so loud it seemed to vibrate the very air. Finally, he lowered the handset, jaw clenched. "We hold here. Nobody goes near that door until I hear otherwise." But the men knew better. Command wasn't going to answer. Maybe they never planned to. Later that afternoon, Carter wandered down to the stream to refill canteens. When he returned, he was pale, clutching something wrapped in cloth. He unrolled it to reveal a notebook, water-damaged but still legible in places. The handwriting matched the documents they'd found earlier, cramped, hurried, filled with diagrams and notes in a mix of Russian and English. One page stood out, a sketch of the door, labeled "Do Not Open." The words were underlined twice, as if the writer had been desperate to make the warning clear. The squad gathered around, reading the entries in silence. Extraction delayed, locals relocated, remaining material classified, another test incomplete, structural risk noted. Do not allow discovery. Site must remain sealed. The implications were chilling. The villages hadn't just been abandoned. They'd been cleared, erased, relocated to keep whatever was behind the door hidden from the world. That night, the squad camped near the entrance, too afraid to sleep inside. The hum was louder than ever, threading through the rocks like a living thing. Shadows moved on the ridges, and the whistle returned. Long, high, circling the camp, a warning and a threat. The men sat with their backs to the fire, rifles across their knees, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. As dawn broke, Pharaoh made the call. "We're going in. 2 men. Quick look, then we move." Brenner and the narrator volunteered, hearts pounding as they stepped into the darkness. Their flashlights cut through the dust, illuminating rough stone walls lined with metal plates. Every 20 feet, faded markings appeared. Numbers, letters, symbols that matched the ones they'd seen outside. The hum was deafening now, vibrating through their bones, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. 50 yards in, they found the chamber. It was circular, lined with consoles covered in dust, dials and switches labeled in Cyrillic. In the center stood the machine, a massive cylinder, cables snaking from its base deep into the rock. The air was thick with the smell of oil and rust, and the hum was so intense it felt like it was coming from inside their own bodies. Above the machine, painted in red, was a single word: danger. Brenner whispered, "Jesus Christ." The narrator couldn't answer. The reality of what they were seeing was too much to process. This wasn't a weapons cache or a supply depot. It was something else, something built to be hidden, to be forgotten. They took photos, sent them up the chain, and turned to leave. As they retraced their steps, the hum seemed to follow, growing louder with every step. When they emerged into the daylight, the squad was waiting, eyes wide with fear. The story spilled out, the machine, the warnings, the sense that the valley itself was alive and angry. Hines said what everyone was thinking. That's why the villages are gone. That's why command won't answer. They don't want us to report it. They want us to bury it. The squad sat in silence, the weight of their discovery pressing down on them. They weren't just soldiers on patrol anymore. They were witnesses to a secret that was never meant to be uncovered. And in the Kunar Valley, being a witness was the most dangerous thing of all. Breakdown and betrayal. The discovery of the machine changed everything. The squad, already frayed by exhaustion and fear, began to unravel in ways that no amount of training could prevent. The valley's silence, once merely unsettling, now felt like a living force, an invisible hand tightening around their throats. Every man carried the weight of what they had seen in the mountain, and the knowledge that command's silence was no accident. The realization settled in. They were expendable, sent not to complete a mission, but to disappear into a secret that was never meant to see daylight. Tension simmered just beneath the surface. The smallest disagreements flared into arguments. Hines and Brenner, usually the backbone of the squad, snapped at each other over rationing supplies and the best route forward. Carter, still shaken from his outburst and the warnings in the notebook, grew withdrawn, his eyes darting constantly to the ridgelines, if expecting the watchers to step out of the shadows at any moment. Even Pharaoh, the lieutenant who had always seemed unshakable, now moved with a stiffness that betrayed his own doubts. His hands trembled when he lit a cigarette, and his voice, once steady, now carried a brittle edge. The squad's trust in command was gone. Every attempt to radio for instructions was met with the same dead static. Or worse, a curt order to remain on mission with no acknowledgement of their discoveries or their casualties. the men began to suspect that someone was listening, just not to help. It felt like they were being monitored, their every move tracked, but their pleas for extraction deliberately ignored. The sense of betrayal was as sharp as any enemy fire. As the days dragged on, the psychological toll deepened. The men's world had shrunk to a handful of battered bodies, a few rifles, and the secrets that they carried. Sleep became a luxury, haunted by nightmares of empty villages and the machine's relentless hum. The squad's routines, setting up camp, checking gear, keeping watch, became rituals of survival, performed with a mechanical precision that barely kept the fear at bay. The valley's watchers, once a distant threat, now felt omnipresent. Every night the whistles returned, circling the camp, a reminder that they were never truly alone. The squad's unity began to fracture. Hines, usually the joker, grew paranoid, convinced that Brenner was hiding something from the rest of them. Brenner, for his part, became obsessed with the documents and symbols, poring over the notebook and the photos they'd taken, searching for a pattern that might explain what they'd found. Carter's wound, though not fatal, became infected, and his fevered ramblings only added to the sense of doom. He muttered about the machine, about the villagers, about the watchers on the ridges, his words a jumble of fear and accusation. One night, as the squad huddled in the ruins of an old Soviet outpost, the tension finally boiled over. Hines accused Brenner of withholding information, of leading them deeper into the valley on purpose. Brenner shot back, his voice raw with exhaustion, that Hines was losing his grip and putting everyone at risk. The argument escalated, voices rising until Pharaoh stepped in, his authority barely holding the group together. "Enough," he snapped. "We're not the enemy. Whatever's out there, whatever command wants, we stick together or we die out here." But the damage was done. The squad's cohesion, once their greatest strength, was now a fragile illusion. Each man was locked in his own private battle, with fear, with doubt, with the knowledge that they had been abandoned by the very people who were supposed to protect them. The sense of betrayal ran deep, poisoning every interaction, every decision. The external threats only made things worse. The watchers on the ridges grew bolder, their presence less a mystery and more a constant pressure. The squad was ambushed twice in as many days. Brief, violent encounters with disciplined fighters who struck from the shadows and vanished before the men could mount a proper defense. These weren't Taliban, and they weren't local militias. Their tactics were too precise, their movements too coordinated. It was as if they were testing the squad, probing for weaknesses, making sure they never got too comfortable. After each attack, the squad found no bodies, no shell casings, no evidence that anyone had ever been there. It was psychological warfare, designed to keep them off balance, to wear them down until they broke. The men began to wonder if the watchers were even human at all, or if they were just another part of the valley's long history of secrets and lies. The final blow came when Carter's condition worsened. His fever spiked, and he became delirious, muttering about the machine and the warnings in the notebook. He begged the others not to let him be taken deeper into the valley, his fear palpable. The squad did what they could, morphine for the pain, water for the fever, but it was clear that without a medic, his chances were slim. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming. They had been sent into the valley with no support, no backup, and now they were paying the price. Pharaoh tried one last time to reach command, his voice cracking with desperation. "Overlord, this is Hunter 1. We are combat ineffective, multiple wounded. We've encountered structures, machines, Soviet origin. Request immediate extraction." The response was chilling in its indifference. "Remain on mission, continue north, further instructions will follow." It was the final confirmation that they were on their own. That night, as the squad buried Carter beneath a pile of stones, the reality of their situation became undeniable. They were no longer a squad, they were survivors, moving on borrowed time. The valley had claimed another life, and the men who remained knew that their own chances of escape were growing slimmer by the hour. The sense of betrayal was complete. The men had been sent into the valley not to fight a war, but to disappear into a secret that was never meant to be uncovered. The watchers on the ridges, the machine in the mountain, the silence from command, It all pointed to one inescapable truth. The squad was expendable, and the valley was a graveyard for secrets. As they prepared to move deeper into the mountains, the men understood that survival was no longer the goal. The only thing left was to bear witness, to carry the truth of what they had seen, even if no one would ever believe them. The valley's silence was no longer just a backdrop to their suffering. It was the final betrayal, the last weapon in a war that had never really ended. The final discovery. By the time the squad reached the northernmost edge of the valley, they were running on little more than instinct and adrenaline. The days had blurred together, marked only by the relentless hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground and the ever-present sense of being watched. The men were gaunt, their uniforms stained with dust and blood, their eyes hollow from too many sleepless nights. The valley had stripped them down to their rawest selves, and what remained was a group of men who no longer believed in rescue, only in endurance. The landscape itself seemed to conspire against them. The trail narrowed to a precarious ledge, the cliffs above threatening to collapse at any moment. The river below was now just a distant memory, replaced by a dry, rocky gulch that offered no comfort or escape. Every step forward felt like a step deeper into a labyrinth with no exit. The squad's world had shrunk to a handful of battered bodies, a few precious rounds of ammunition, and the secrets they carried. It was in this state, exhausted, desperate, and nearly broken, that they stumbled upon the pit. It was a wide, circular depression cut into the mountain, lined with cracked concrete and ringed by the rusted skeleton of a crane. Cables hung limp, swaying in the wind, and at the bottom of the pit, half buried in rock and dust, was another machine, larger than the one they'd found in the tunnel, its panels torn open, wires spilling out like veins. The hum here was deafening, a physical force that pressed against their skulls and made their vision blur. Spray painted on the wall beside the pit, in crude English, were 3 words: "Not for us." The squad stood at the edge, rifles slack at their sides, staring down at the machine. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. The meaning was clear, even if the details were not. Whatever the Soviets had built here, whatever had been sealed away and guarded for decades, it was never meant to be found by outsiders. The warnings in the notebooks, the symbols carved into stone, the vanished villages, all of it pointed to this place, this secret, this final terrible discovery. Pharaoh, his face drawn and pale, finally broke the silence. "This is what they sent us for," he said, voice barely more than a whisper. "Not to fight, not to patrol, to confirm it's still here." The words hung in the air, heavy with resignation. The squad had never been meant to survive. They were witnesses, not warriors, and their presence in the valley was just another layer of secrecy, another insurance policy for those who pulled the strings far away from the mountains. They didn't get time to process what they had found. The first shot cracked from the ridge above, slamming into the dirt at their feet. Instinct took over. The men dove for cover, returning fire toward the high ground. Shadows moved along the rim of the pit, figures in dark clothing, disciplined and coordinated, firing in short, controlled bursts. These weren't Taliban, and they weren't local fighters. Their tactics were too precise, their movements too deliberate. It was as if they'd been waiting for the squad to arrive. The firefight was short and brutal. Rounds chewed through the concrete, ricocheted off the rusted crane, and sent chips of stone flying through the air. Brenner went down first, a round catching him in the chest. Hines dragged him behind cover, shouting for help, but it was already too late. Carter, feverish and weak, tried to return fire but collapsed, his strength finally spent. Pharaoh barked orders, trying to rally the men, but the squad was scattered, pinned from all sides. When the shooting finally stopped, the ridge was empty again. No bodies, no shell casings, just the echo of gunfire and the relentless hum of the machine below. The squad was decimated. Brenner was dead, Carter was gone, and Hines was bleeding from a wound in his leg. Only Pharaoh and the narrator remained unscathed, but even they knew it was only a matter of time before the valley claimed them too. In the aftermath, the men sat in the dirt, rifles across their knees, staring at the machine. The hum seemed to grow louder, filling the silence with a sense of inevitability. Pharaoh tried the radio one last time, his voice flat and defeated. "Overlord, This is Hunter 1. Mission complete. Do you copy? For a moment, there was only static. Then a cold, mechanical voice crackled through the speaker. Hunter 1, A should acknowledge, proceed north, extraction not authorized. Pharaoh stared at the handset, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Then, without a word, he hurled the radio into the pit. The message was clear. Command had never intended to pull them out. Their mission was to confirm the secret, not to survive it. With no other options, the survivors turned south, hoping against hope that they could escape the valley on foot. The journey was a nightmare. Hines collapsed after a day, his wound infected and his strength gone. He begged to be left behind, and eventually they did, his voice fading into the wind as they pressed on. By the time the narrator staggered out of the valley, he was alone, starved, wounded, and haunted by the knowledge of what he'd seen. Back at base, the story was buried as quickly as it had surfaced. The official report listed the squad as lost to enemy action, the mission incomplete. There was no mention of the machines, the pit, or the watchers on the ridges. The men in suits who came to debrief the survivor asked their questions in flat, rehearsed tones, never writing anything down, never offering explanations. The valley's secret remained intact, sealed away by silence and denial. But the memory lingered, the hum of the machine, the warnings in the notebooks, the sense of being watched by something older and more dangerous than any enemy. They became scars that would never heal. The final discovery in the pit was not just a relic of the Cold War, but a reminder that some secrets are kept not to protect the world, but to protect those who hold the power to bury the truth. And as the survivor looked back on the valley, he understood at last. The mission had never been about victory or defeat. It had been about erasure, of evidence, of witnesses, of anyone who might ask the wrong questions. The valley had claimed another squad, and the secret at its heart remained, humming in the darkness, waiting for the next set of footsteps to disturb its sleep. Aftermath and cover-up. Emerging from the Kunar Valley was less a return to safety than a passage into another kind of silence. The last survivor stumbled out of the mountains, half dead, sunburned, and delirious, his mind still echoing with the hum of the machine and the memory of friends lost to a secret war. The world outside the valley felt unreal, too bright, too loud, too indifferent to the suffering that had taken place just beyond the horizon. He was rushed into medical, his wounds stitched and his body rehydrated, but nothing could touch the deeper injuries, the ones that lived in memory and nightmare. The debriefing began almost immediately. Two men in suits, faces blank and voices flat, appeared at the foot of his hospital bed. They weren't officers, and they didn't wear any insignia. Their questions were precise, rehearsed, and strangely detached. What had he seen? Who was left alive? What did he remember about the tunnels, the machines, the symbols, the watchers on the ridges? He answered as best he could, but every time he mentioned the machine or the warnings in the notebooks, the men simply nodded, never writing anything down, never betraying a hint of surprise or concern. The next day, a different pair of men arrived, asking the same questions in the same monotone voices. The survivor realized quickly that these weren't interviews. They were tests designed to see if his story would change, if he would contradict himself, if he would break under the pressure. But he didn't. He told the truth, or at least as much of it as he could bear to remember. The men in suits listened, nodded, and left. He never saw them again. After that, the orders came fast. He was transferred to a different unit, a different province, with no explanation and no chance to say goodbye to anyone who might have known what happened in the valley. His official record listed the mission as incomplete. The squad is lost to enemy action. There was no mention of the machines, the tunnels, or the pit. No mention of the warnings, the watchers, or the silence that had swallowed his friends. The valley itself was erased from the paperwork, just another line in a war that was full of them. He was told not to speak of it, not to mention the valley, the mission, or anything he'd seen. The message was clear. Some things were not for public knowledge. Some things were meant to stay buried. He kept his mouth shut, because he knew what happened to men who didn't. Some disappeared into paperwork. Others drank themselves out of the core. He chose silence, But silence didn't erase memory. It only made it sharper, more painful, a wound that never closed. The nightmares came every night, not of firefights or explosions, but of empty villages, meals half-eaten, blankets still warm from bodies that had vanished. He dreamed of the machine, humming in the darkness, and of the watchers on the ridges, their faces hidden, their motives unknowable. He dreamed of Carter's fevered eyes, of Brenner's last breath, of Heinz's voice fading into the wind. He woke up gasping, heart pounding, the taste of dust and fear still in his mouth. Sometimes in the years that followed, he would hear whispers, rumors passed in bars by men who had served in the same region. A declassified line buried in a report, a story that didn't quite add up. Always vague, always unfinished, but enough to remind him that the valley hadn't gone away. Not for him, not for the men who never made it out, and not for the people who ran the wars behind the wars. Somebody was still keeping it quiet. Somebody was still making sure it never showed up in the history books. He wondered about the villagers, the families who had vanished without a trace. Where had they gone? What had they been told? Did they know what was buried under their land? Or had they simply been forced out, their lives erased to protect a secret they would never understand? He wondered about the men who attacked the squad, the disciplined fighters who struck from the shadows and vanished without a trace. Were they protecting the valley from outsiders? Or were they protecting outsiders from what lay beneath it? He would never know. None of them would. The survivor carried the truth like a stone in his chest. He knew what he had seen, even if no one else would ever believe it. He knew that the valley was more than just a place on a map. It was a graveyard for secrets, a monument to the cost of silence. He told his story not for closure, because there was none, but because silence was the last weapon used by those who wanted the truth to stay buried. If nobody spoke, then Kunar would become just another forgotten battle, just another place where men fought, bled, and died for reasons no one would ever ask about. But the truth was simpler and darker. The squad hadn't been fighting the Taliban. They hadn't been fighting for hearts and minds, or even for their own survival. They had been witnesses, and witnesses are dangerous. The valley had claimed them, one by one, and left only silence in their place. He never returned to Kunar. He never saw the valley again, except in dreams. But sometimes late at night, when the world was quiet and the hum of the machine seemed to echo in his bones, he would remember. He would remember the silence, the secrets, and the cost of knowing too much. And he would wonder how many other valleys there were, how many other secrets had been buried, and how many other men had been told to forget. Because some things stay buried, but not forever. And as long as someone remembers, as long as someone is willing to speak, the truth will never be completely erased. Conclusion. Some stories end with answers. This one ends with questions. Questions that echo long after the last shot is fired, long after the last survivor has left the valley behind. What really happened in Kunar? Why did entire villages vanish overnight, leaving behind only silence and the faint hum of something buried deep beneath the mountains? Who were the watchers on the ridges and what were they guarding or containing? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, how many other secrets like this are hidden in the world's forgotten corners, waiting for the wrong people to stumble across them? For the lone survivor, the valley never truly let go. The world moved on, the war shifted to new headlines, and the official records closed the book on another failed mission. But the memories remained, sharp and unyielding. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the empty villages, the symbols carved into stone, the machine humming in the darkness. He remembered the faces of his squad, men who had trusted their orders, who had believed in the mission, who had paid the price for a secret they never asked to uncover. The silence that followed the mission was not just the absence of sound, but a deliberate act, a wall built to keep the truth from leaking out. The survivor learned quickly that some things were never meant to be spoken of, that the cost of knowing was often paid in isolation and fear. He watched as the world forgot, as new wars began and old ones faded into myth. But he never forgot. The valley was a scar that would never heal, a reminder that some truths are too dangerous to be told. And yet, the story refuses to die. Whispers persist, rumors of other squads sent into the mountains, of strange discoveries hushed up by men in suits, of villages erased from maps and memories alike. Sometimes a name will surface in a declassified report, or a half-remembered story will be told in a bar by a man who drinks too much and sleeps too little. Always the details are vague, the ending's unfinished, but the pattern is there for anyone willing to look. A trail of silence, a chain of secrets, a history written in what is left unsaid. The survivor sometimes wonders if the watchers on the ridges were ever truly the enemy. Maybe they were guardians, not of the valley, but of the world outside, keeping something contained, protecting others from a danger that could never be fully understood. Or maybe they were just men like him, caught in a web of orders and secrets, doing what they had to do to survive. The truth, he suspects, is somewhere in between. In war, the lines between friend and foe, right and wrong, are always blurred by the fog of secrecy. He also wonders about the villagers, the families who vanished without a trace. Were they warned? Were they relocated for their own safety? Or simply swept aside to make room for a secret that was never theirs? Did they know what was hidden beneath their land? Or were they just collateral damage in a game played by men far away? The questions haunt him, as do the faces of his squad, lost to a mission that was never meant to be completed. In the end, the valley remains, a place out of time, a graveyard for secrets, a monument to the cost of silence. The machine still hums in the darkness, the watchers still patrol the ridges, and the truth remains buried, waiting for the next set of footsteps to disturb its uneasy sleep. The survivor carries the story not for closure, but as a warning. Some things are meant to stay hidden, but the cost of burying the truth is always paid by those who are forced to keep it. So when you hear stories of lost patrols, of missions gone wrong, of places erased from maps and memories, remember this: the silence is never empty. It is filled with the weight of secrets, with the voices of those who were never allowed to speak. And sometimes the most dangerous thing in a war zone isn't the enemy you can see, but the truth you're never meant to find. If you've made it this far, you're one of the few who knows what really happened in the Kunar Valley. Maybe you've heard rumors of your own, stories that never made the news, whispers passed between those who served. If you have, share them. Speak up, because silence is the last weapon of those who want the truth to stay buried. And as long as someone is willing to remember, to question, to tell the story, the valley's secret will never be completely erased. So what do you think really happened out there? Was it just another mission lost to the chaos of war? Or was it something more, something that still waits, hidden in the shadows, for the next chapter to begin? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Share your own stories, your own questions, your own truths, because in the end, the only way to break the silence is to speak.